Who's ready to get the last panel of MAGWest started? Woo! Have a great Mag, everyone. All right. Hi, my name is Lucas Guimaras. This is a panel that's basically the story of it is a couple of friends and I were chatting. We're like, man, we'd love to do more for talking about arrangements in the community because there's a lot that are discussed in other topics like everything from mixing to licensing, how to make a video. But arranging is this weird part that like not a lot of us have talked about. So we did this panel at, this isn't the first time we did this panel. We did this panel at VGM Con a couple of months back. There was like 5 of us, a little bit hectic. And for those that don't know me, my name is Lucas Guimaras. I've been around the VGM communities and spaces for almost a decade now making music. Started with Materia, been around OC Remix, Game Grooves. The shirt's actually from one of their albums, Link 182. And like Pixel Mixers, Dwelling of Duels, all around the place. And with me, I have 2 other wonderful panelists.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm Joe Newman. Sometimes go by Numa Joe. I've been in the music scene also for quite a while, but not really putting out my own stuff until probably only like a couple of years ago. I've just been a sideman before that. But very active in Dwelling of Duels, which is how I met Lucas. Since I started putting out, my own VGM arrangements, it's been very fun. So this, for those of you who follow the Game Music Remix Awards, I was, I think, between my arrangements and collaborations, I got 5 nominations last year. So in a bunch of different, thank you, including Album of the Year, which was very cool. And I don't see Jay, but we did win for our hip hop arrangement. So that's his arrangement. I just clapped it. But anyway, so yeah, I do a bunch of arranging. And I play sometimes with these guys.
Yeah, Joe.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm local, actually. I play in my band Super Soul Rose, and I do all the arrangements, more or less. I do the bulk of the arrangements. Yeah, that's me. I'm Pops. Yeah. So you can call me Pops. Most people don't call me Alex, just some sort of derivative of my last name, whatever you want. It's more fun to say, so. I actually probably won't turn my head if you call out Alex, because I'm just not used to it. So I've been doing the arrangements for Super Soul Bros since I joined the band, which would have been almost 10 years ago now. So that's what I actually started with my arranging experience. So it started off pretty simple, pretty basic, and then I kind of just grew my skills through trial and error, just doing it, because no one else was going to do it, so. Because before I joined the band, actually, there was no sheet music or anything. They were just kind of listening to stuff and jamming on it and coming up with ideas. And then when I joined the band, I was like, man, I want to get some horns involved. And, it's hard to get 3 horns in sync and just come up with stuff on the spot. Hi, Tony. So this is going to be fun. I'm not sure what we're doing next.
So what is arranging? A friend of mine recommended me to have a brief slide about this because we didn't last time. So basically arranging is taking a song, but because there's covers and there's arranging, there's a whole debate about what words mean what. But for the sake of this panel, we'll simplify. Arranging is taking a song and adding something that's a little bit of your own of an existing composition. It's an adaptation of it. So sometimes that can mean reharmonizing or changing up the original melody or changing up the chords behind it. Sometimes that can mean adding an original section to a track. So I've sometimes heard some covers that are like the original song will have an A section, a B section, and a C section, and then the artist will add in a D section or add in something else a bit different. Different instrumentation. Maybe the track started out as a rock track and you take it, make it a classical piano track, or maybe it's an orchestra track and you take it and make it big band jazz or something, or just a jazz combo or something else. Is and that kind of rolls into new genres too. So new genres, different instrumentation, and much more. There's a whole really rich history to the history, even the history in VGM arrangements. There's so much to the history of arranging, but that is outside of the scope of this panel.
Yeah, I mean, we can keep going, but I think one of the things
Yeah.
that's
You can go for adding more to it.
yeah, okay. In the spirit of arranging. Yeah, but so you take something that exists, and a lot of particularly video game music wasn't designed for live performance, and certainly wasn't designed. In some cases, wasn't even designed to be played in a linear fashion with the beginning, middle, and end. They're just designed to be loops. So crafting that journey, that is part of what arrangers do. To take a melodic or a rhythmic or a thematic concept and sort of extrapolating and expanding upon it.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add? It's totally fine if you don't.
No, not really. You guys
Okay.
kinda covered it all.
Anyways, the next one. So this one will be a short slide, but by sheer coincidence, this panel wound up with 3 saxophonists. So it's going to be very interesting between even people who share playing the same instrument as their primary instrument, and seeing how we all still 3 have like wildly different and ever-changing approaches to how we arrange. Some similarities, some differences. All right, so here's a little bit more about me. The Spark Notes. My favorite game of all time is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. There's tons of games I love. Pretty much those are like the top. Right there lists like my top 4. I pretty much consider Chrono Trigger and Cross a duology. Absolutely love me some Rock Band as well. Rock Band 3, Custom Rock Band 3. Woo! Lots of bands I love. I should have probably at some point list all my favorite VGM composers. My absolute favorites, Yasunori Mitsuda, of course. Mitsuda the King. Woo. We can move on. All right, so my process. I have not rehearsed this since VGM. So my usual arrangement process. It's been a little bit different lately, but this is more or less how I do it. So I start out with the initial idea. Like before I even open my computer or before I open anything else, I have to sometimes that idea is very like simple in my head. Like I go in and I'm like, I kind of know the instrumentation, but I have this like really cool riff that I want to try with this song. Like how I did an arrangement recently of Bloody Tears, except it's like 25% speed, and it started out because I was just playing it on my guitar, and I was trying to play it full speed, and I'm like, this sounds actually way cooler if I just like let the vibrato sting out and play it at 25% speed, and that turned into like a whole arrangement. And then other times I kind of have like the whole thing, it is just in my head, and I have all different ways for brainstorming that. I'll get into how I brainstorm that in the next slide. But I write it out in Sibelius after that, which is a notation program. So before I start recording anything, I write it out. I shopped around for feedback, and feedback is very important. And it's especially important in the early stages because if you've got it's kind of like drawing. If you have a good sketch, then even if you mess up later, you can always go back and undo that. But if you have a bad sketch but a really good coloring, you can't quite do that. It's kind of the same thing with arrangement. You can have an amazing mix, but if the arrangement just isn't there, then you have to go back to the start. So edit sheets and export mock-ups if necessary. It depends if I have collaborators, how much they're going to be reading it, or if I can like handle reading my own messy sheets. Direction for performers is important. I try to make sure I have that. Sometimes letting performers do what they want has been open to interpretation, has been great, and sometimes it's been, can you please re-record this? And then recording, mixing, feedback, mastering is the rest of my process, but that is also well outside the scope of the panel. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here are a couple of tips and advices tips I've learned throughout arranging. The first is people, it's overwhelming. Like even if it's just like a 3-minute song or something, it's overwhelming. It's where do I start? And kind of recommend for everything, do like 15 minutes or do like 5 minutes a day. And the suggestion I give for music is the 8-bar suggestion. If you do 8 bars of music, especially depending on how slow it is, sometimes if it's a fast genre, I'll switch it up to if it's like 220 BPM or something, I'll switch it to 16 bars. But 8 bars of music, and that will get you your first 20 to 30, 15 to 30 or so seconds. And that is where I like to start off. When I had this free period of time where I was just able to arrange a bunch, I just started doing, instead of working on just one arrangement, I was working on a couple of arrangements and doing 8 bars a day. Sometimes great days, some days not. Don't be afraid to stray from the original. As Joe was saying earlier, a lot of in the case of VGM arranging specifically, a lot of these songs were made to loop indefinitely. And when you're making something that's like intended to be listened from like beginning, middle, and end, like many of your favorite bands and all, you want to go for that. So again, never be afraid, and you know, you can always learn and take it from the next one. Take things from your favorite songs. I have taken so much from my favorite songs. I don't even know where to begin, from everything from like the beginning conceptual phase to like the mixing and mastering phase. It's always a feedback loop where I'm constantly inspired by the new things. And speaking of, do your homework, which is research. One thing, your ears are insanely useful. One thing I've started doing between VGMCon and now is master copies, where I take a song and try to replicate it as much as possible, so it causes me to like listen for all the little things in that track. And that it goes a little more into recordings, but it's very, but even research on other levels is important. And that can be anything from transcription to performing, like to just like performing a track and kind of like diving into the nuts and bolts of what's going on in the things you're inspired by. Have other people review your arrangements. We kind of talked about this with feedback, and as I said before, the more you nail down in the arrangement phase, less work later. Never be afraid to ask questions. That is one I really try to do my best at. I would not be up on this stage if I wasn't really, really curious. Another thing, I forgot to add in this bullet point, but this one kind of goes outside of the arrangement phase. But if you're working especially if you're working in a MIDI mockup, always remember, and I've been guilty of this for years, there's going to be what tone you have into it. Like, you don't want to spend too many hours. There's a return on investment. There's a point where sunk cost fallacy starts to kick in, and you don't want to be spending too much time like twiddling this knob. Like, this reverb needs to be 9% wet, and you're switching between like 9% and 8% wet, and you're just like, duh, duh, and you can barely hear a difference. But it is important knowing, especially if you have like a mock-up sound, that the final sound is going to be different and it might need to be altered. And finally, for anyone who out here, like, I'm surprised I haven't even asked this, who out here like wants to frickin' arrange VGM? Raise your hands, or like loves arranging it. Yeah, like, all right. So this is also a PSA for myself. You need to finish your damn projects. You need to finish your damn, I don't care if it's crap, I don't care how good it is, how bad it is, you need to finish your damn projects. Finish, move on to the next thing.
And if you need external motivation, as many of us do, you could always join Dwelling of Duels.
Dwelling of Duels.
Dwellingofduels.net, for those of you who don't know, is a monthly competition where you all have to arrange a tune, and if you don't make it by deadline, you don't get your tune in that month. So it is really, really good for motivation for getting stuff finished.
Oh shit, now I want to make like an 80s style like promo for the commercial for like these communities later. Future panel idea.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Next, Joe.
Okay, so you can see this stuff. I'm not going to be able to name all my favorite bands, but before I get into the actual nuts and bolts of like how I approach an arrangement, I want to kind of jump off what Lucas said. So I think a lot of the initial process of like coming up with a good arrangement idea, because that's the kind of magic part that, you know, once you arrange, you can arrange it, but having a good idea that grabs you or grabs someone else, I think there's probably, Charlie Rosen did an interview with Pixelated Audio, and he did a really good job sort of talking about there's two types of arrangements. There's this, what I call the dream arrangement, which is you're taking a source that is like retro in nature, like, you know, typically like something 8 or 16-bit, and you're reimagining it with the instrumentation that the composer probably had in their head when they were composing it. And that's what, you know, half of the 8-bit big band arrangements are that. You know, the original sounded like Dixieland, they went full Dixieland. And then the other half is you zag instead of zig. So like, you know, the song was a certain way, and your elevator pitch is X song, but what if we did it like this? And the clearer you, like that, if you can answer that sentence in a very clear way, like you have a strong arrangement. right? Like, and for me, I do basically everything I do as a collaboration. The better that I'm able to put that into words, the easier it is for me to get other people on board and excited about that vision, right? So if I say, oh, we're gonna do Mario, but we're gonna do it as salsa, at least people can wrap their head around it, right? They can kind of be like, oh, okay, well that means I'm gonna be thinking about these artists and I'm gonna be thinking about these quotes or, you know, whatever. So once you have that idea, if it's an idea that you can clearly articulate and are excited about, that's usually a good sign that it's a solid starting place for an arrangement. So when it comes to actually doing the arrangement, these are two images that I absolutely love. On the left is the sort of narrative 3-act structure. You know, I was an English major, and we talk a lot about, you know, the exposition, the midpoint, the climax, the denouement. What I really love, though, is there's actually a different version in Japanese culture. It's called the, I'm going to butcher it, Kisho Tenketsu. Somebody check me on that. But it's a 4-part story structure. Instead of 3-act structure, it is a 4-part story structure where you have an introduction of an idea, development of an idea, a twist on that idea, and then a conclusion. You can see they're very similar, but there's nuances to the approach. And if you really, since we're all nerds here, there's an amazing YouTube video about how Nintendo in particular uses Kisho Tenketsu for their level design in Mario. It's really cool. I send everybody the link. But the idea is, first you're going to introduce an idea, then you're going to sort of restate that idea in a different way, then you're going to twist it, do something different and unexpected with that idea, and then you bring it all home for a big climactic finish. And I'll give an example. So one of my arrangements that I like very, very clearly follows this structure is the arrangement I did of Angel Island Zone. So this is called Dios Mio, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you will hear, keep that Kisho Tenketsu idea in your mind. You're going to hear an intro, it's going to be the melody, and it's going to be pretty straightforward, and then it's going to be the melody again, but with some embellishments, and then it's going to twist. So we're introducing the bass line. I'm going to talk over it. We're starting to layer in this salsa. We're introducing the idea that this is a salsa arrangement. Building up steam, establishing the idea. Again, introducing. This is kind of the exposition. Okay, here's the melody. This is a little bit of a dip. Like, this is where you know the song, but there aren't any surprises happening. Again, so now we added a harmony line on top of it. We're trading the melody in between different parts. So we're kind of establishing this. So that's going to come back later. We're not going to listen to the whole song. But see, that's the conclusion of Act 1, right? And here's a little bit of the little lull before we build it up to the second act. Now it's the melody again. We're in Act 2, but now we're adding all these extra little stabs with the horns. Yeah, things like that. All right, so I won't play anymore because you all can go find the song. But yes, it's going to keep building, and then it eventually is going to turn into something even more. And usually, you know, for the twist or the 3-act structure, I come from a jazz background, so that's when you're adding the solos, or that's when you're, you know, improvising or building or doing a soli. That's where you're introducing your original compositions. That's usually where the twist happens in my arrangement. And then it all kind of brings back for the big grand finale. So I find when I am struggling to come up with, There we go. When I'm struggling to come up with an actual arrangement, I know I like the song, I know I like the idea. It helps me a ton to think about that for either 3 or 4 part structure. So then, when it comes to actually making the track, I'm going to steal something. So Anton Karaza just posted this morning, and I fucking love this line. He says, composition is just improvisation with save states. And I love that. It's spot on. So like, if you have the luxury of being able to record at home, what I will do is I will loop a section, and I will just loop it over and over, and I'll just try out different ideas. And then in the edit, I'll start picking and choosing things that are working, right? And it starts with improvisation. As certain ideas start to coalesce, it then becomes, okay, these are the ideas that I want to have in the solo, and now the fun is sort of how do I get to each idea and string them together. So like, this is for the arrangement of Cuphead that I just did this past month. So you can see here on the right, this was the alto solo I did. I knew at the beginning that I wanted to start with a very specific line. So you can see the waveform in all the takes is almost identical because I'm doing the same lick. Because I'm like, okay, I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to kind of go from there. And you can see about in take 15, I stumbled upon a line that I liked, right? And you can see now in every subsequent take, I'm doing that line, right? And it's not improv anymore. Like, it should be clear, like, this is not an improvised solo anymore, and you don't get to use save states when you're doing a live performance, but when you have the luxury of really thinking through the line and iterating and creating this line, you can create a solo or a composition or whatever that sounds like it was improvised, but it's an illusion of many different takes sort of strung together. Those are kind of my little secret tips when it comes to how to create sort of natural sounding compositions and arrangement. And yeah, I think that's it.
It's time for Mr. Popoff.
Oh, wait. I need to pull it up so you can see it. Okay.
I feel you.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how I start my process for arranging. I'm going to get into some just general advice or tips I have, and then I'm going to show an example of arrangement I did that is in a video game called Frame Makers, which is on Steam. It's early access. It's a fighting game like Smash Bros. And that was pretty much all arrangements. A couple originals, but they would give me songs they wanted from other games, and they're like, "Now make this, for the fighting game, make it like a fighting game song." So, and as far as all this stuff goes, like Joe, there's way too much stuff to list. But as far as my biggest influences, I put Joshua Redman, sax player extraordinaire. Jazz guy who basically my whole life, I'd say is like almost 50% of my listening, like of everything I listen to, is just like ingrained in me. And then Yuzo Koshiro, he's a composer, Japanese composer. He did Streets of Rage games, and he also did the Etrian Odyssey games. And the Etrian Odyssey games in particular are very influential to me and my style. They're kind of, it's like JRPG rock, I guess. It's kind of got an anime sound to it, but not overly so. I really enjoy that. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so this is how I start. Active listening. So this is what you're doing all the time. This is before you've even got an idea for arrangement. So this is where when you hear a song and you like it, active listening is going, well, why do I like it? Or if you don't like something, what don't I like about it? And why don't I like it? Why isn't it working for me personally? And doing that all the time, one of the things about music theory, my professor in college told us, is that when you learn music theory, it kind of ruins your life in some ways, because you can't watch a movie and just see what's happening on the screen. You're in the background, you're like, oh my God, that resolution, like, your focus is somewhere else. But it's something I always do. Whenever I hear a song come on, I've been doing this for a long time, because people sometimes think like, oh, like I have perfect pitch. I don't, like not even close. But what I do is any song I hear, ambient, walking through a hotel lobby, I got to try to figure out what key is this in. And you do that for enough years, And then pretty soon now when I hear an E, I just know it's E because I've heard E, and I've analyzed that so many times. So when you're active listening, you're thinking a little deeper about the choices in the arrangement, the song, the composition you're listening to, and just trying to, answer the question why. Why does this work or why doesn't it work? Because that subconsciously will influence your writing, even if you don't, take any notes on that. All right, so first thing I do, I transcribe. I'm not even looking at the phone. I'm just reading off the thing. Here we go. Transcribe the original melody and the bass roots, so the root notes of the bass. That's what I start with. That's my skeleton. And that's what I actually did for the arrangement I'm going to show you. The reason I do that is because obviously the melody is the most important part that you're going to be covering. And then the root notes of the bass, because I don't want to spend time writing out the whole bass line, but I want to know like what is the root harmony. Because then you can do a lot from there. I don't even try to think too hard. Is this like major, minor, whatever? Then you have a framework there that you can start working with. Okay, next is identify defining features of the song. So for me, that could be a lot of different things. So the arrangement I'm going to show is from Slay the Spire. And in the melody, there's some triplets that happen throughout the melody all the time. And I felt like those shouldn't be removed in the arrangement. I felt like if I were to alter that rhythm or change it too much, that the song would lose its identity and you might not recognize what you're listening to anymore. So things like that. So that's like a rhythm, maybe a particular harmony if there's two lines like playing at the same time in a melody, something like that. And then of course the chord structure. Things that you feel like if you took them out, it wouldn't be that song anymore, or it would lose the structure entirely. Okay, and this is kind of what Joe was talking about, Joe and Lucas. So experiment on your instrument of choice. So it could be, we're sax players. Sometimes I do piano, but I'll have that stuff. And then I just start playing. I start with the melody, and I just start playing and kind of improvising around it, recording. I could sometimes record it, sometimes I don't. But you'll start to, you might accidentally play something, or you play something, you go, oh, I kind of like that. For me, it's all about igniting that spark. Because for me personally, when that spark is ignited, the rest comes so easy. It just blows up. And then, so truthfully, my arranging process is sitting there for hours like this, going like, what the hell? I don't know. I have nothing. I have no ideas. Everyone's better than me, whatever. And then I'll be doodling around. I'm like, hey, I kind of like that. Oh, hey, I could do this. And then I could do this and that. And then it's done in a day. So that's how I do it. It's all about trying to find ways to get that spark going. So once you've done all that and you kind of got a feel for the melody, all that, you're choosing the style and genre. So sometimes that'll come, I put that after because sometimes that'll come during the earlier parts. Maybe you already know going in. For me, a lot of times I'm doing it for a specific purpose, or like a deadline or a game or something. So the style and genre, it is really important, but sometimes you will already know ahead of time what you're gonna do. And as far as that goes, you might also be influenced by what you have access to, your resources. So that could be, for me, I knew I was gonna be recording with Super Soul Bro, so I know, okay, I'm gonna have horns, I'm gonna have a really good guitar player and organist who can also do the bass stuff for me. So I kind of know what I'm working with, and that influenced a lot of my choices because I have the guys I like to work with, and I know what they're good at. And then last,
I feel like you could do a whole panel just on how to build with your collaborate and how to use the people that and
absolutely
build songs around people's
100%.
build songs around people's specific superpowers.
Yeah, when I have Robbie record stuff for me, for him, I don't really write stuff out because I know he's not going to really read it. I just give him some slash marks and I say, kind of do something like ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba-da-da, and then he just does it. But I know he can do that. I trust him to do that. Whereas, if it's someone that I don't oftentimes work with or I haven't worked with before, I make sure, like Lucas said, I give them solid charts. I write notes in there. I give them mock-ups. Make their job easier. They're taking the time to record for you, and it sucks when they do that for you, and then you have to say, hey, could you do it again? I don't like doing that. Sometimes you have to, and it's okay, but you want to try to minimize that and be respectful of their time. Make it as easy as possible, because when you make it really easy for them, it's going to sound better too for you than if it's confused. So speaking on both sides, having been on a side where I get very little, and they want something specific from me, but they don't know how to describe it. And like there was a project I did, and what he wanted me to play like I was growling on the sax, but he didn't know how to describe that. He's like, can you play like distorted and like kind of like I don't know, like like that angry, and it would have been a lot easier if he had known the proper terminology or had been able to explain it a little better.
Right. The more you hang out with instruments, like people who play different instruments, the more you'll just learn by osmosis. And then I hang out with Tuck and Sam all the time, and they just show me tricks and cool things that you can do on the instrument, and then that's inspiring, right? Then you can just build something around it.
Yeah, and also ask questions too. So if you're having someone record a violin and you know nothing about strings, ask them, be like, is this a comfortable range? Or like send them some stuff ahead of time. Does this make sense? Because you got to learn somehow, right? And that's how I learned a lot of stuff. Is just I have people record, and I'm just like, so like how would an oboe play this? Oboist play this? Does this work on the range? Or like it says on Sibelius, I'm in the range, but is this really like a typical range for this instrument?
And sometimes if you don't know, write the dumb thing first and get the feedback. For the OC Remix Final Fantasy VIII album, the largest OC Remix album now that came out recently, I did Man with the Machine Gun, but it's usually made into EDM or rock, but I made it into a string quartet, and it changed. I basically wrote the track in like 3 hours. It barely changed from beginning to when it was recorded, but the biggest difference was there was a lot of reorchestration, because I talked with the people and they're like, arrangement sounds great, here's some orchestration stuff, and they're like, strings can't do that, and also that rhythm's gonna sound like we can do that if we punch it in, but it's gonna sound like a mess and you're not gonna enjoy it. So it's okay to be told, like, rethink the line. Like, you can only know so much, and even some of the best orchestrators I know, like, they all have weak points and everything. Everyone in the scene's happy to share their knowledge. Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of what you'll notice what we're saying up here, we're kind of saying a lot of the same things, but in different ways. And I don't really have a follow-up for that. Can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. All right, so just some other tips I jotted down. Yeah, don't be afraid to scrap something if it isn't working. This is something I struggle with, where I have a really good idea. I have something I like in a song, and I know it's not working, but I'm doing everything to like restructure around it to try and make it work. When sometimes you just have to let the idea go, or save it and store it for another song, another day. There's a lot of songs actually where I had an idea, didn't quite work out, but then I came back and revisited it for another project, and it happened to work out better for that. But yeah, don't get super married to a specific idea or something. Be flexible, and be honest with yourself. If it's not sounding good, if it's not working, you can move on. It's okay. All right, yeah. Good musicians borrow, great ones steal. So steal things from your favorite arrangements. Do it, please, plagiarize. But seriously, people are so afraid to sound like something else, or they try to change things specifically to not sound like something else and make it sound worse in the process. If you like something from a song, take that little thing you like. Obviously, you don't plagiarize a whole section of a song, but if it's like for example, I just for fun made this JRPG battle theme on my own time. That was very Etrian Odyssey inspired. And the horns in it, there's some rhythms they do, and the notes are different, but I took the rhythms straight from another Yuzo Koshiro song. I'm like, I like that, and I like that shape. And so I just copy and pasted it in there, and then from there, and then I kind of changed the notes so that it fit my arrangement. But, a few years ago, I would have been really worried about that, like thinking like that's not something you're supposed to do. No, you should. Use your inspirations, take from them. There's only 12 notes, so don't worry too much about sounding like something else.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, even if this has happened to me multiple times where I've written something that I thought was original, and then years later, I'm like, oh, god damn it, it's from Link's Awakening. It's like, you're gonna find out, and like, I had this happened to me when I was in college. I was in a composition class, and I wrote something, and I was proud of it. I thought it was original, and the professor was like, "That's just Eric Satie's Je ne peux dire in a different key." And I'm like, "Oh, god damn it!" And he's like, "No, it's cool. Just retitled the piece a tribute to Eric Satie's Je ne peux dire." And I was like, "Cool." And he's like, "A+."
Quick side note. I remember the slight thing I forgot, and it's because I didn't have a bullet point for it. But a lot of how I arrange or compose or honestly do anything creative, and it really does work. It's like blank meets blank. So that's kind of the thing. Like even that Man with the Machine Gun I talk about. It's like Man with the Machine Gun, but it's a string quartet. It's like I did a Golden Sun one that's a Golden Sun in the style Take 5. So it's like Golden Sun meets like chamber jazz. So it's like, just try it. If you are at a wall with something creatively, if you're like, fuck, I have writer's block, removing the decision fatigue helps so much.
Absolutely. And like Lucas said, make a mock-up for your performers if you can, so like a MIDI scratch or something, or even if it's not the whole song, like their part, because sometimes you can convey something that you can't convey with words. You can have it sound as close to what you want, and that's a good starting point. So having a mock-up really does help if you have the time to do that. Don't be lazy with repeats. So that just means if you have a song, it's like A, B, A, B, C. Don't go A, B, and then cut and paste that just to extend it. C, you want to introduce some new layers, some new variety. If you have live performers, it's actually kind of nice because there will already be some inherent variations in the performance. But it's really tempting to do that because you worked so hard on the first A, B, and then you go like, oh, it's another minute down if I just cut and paste it.
Got to do Tisho Kentetsu or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Develop it. Do the same thing, but just add a harmony.
The development.
Yeah.
So basically what Joe was saying.
Yeah.
There is such a thing as over-arranging. So I said, think like a cook. What I mean by that is salt tastes good. If you just dump a whole packet of salt onto a single fry, it's kind of repulsive. Think about arranging like that. You've got various spices and various elements, and some spices work together with others and some don't. Like maybe oboe and electric guitar. You probably, in most contexts, wouldn't work, but that's not to say it can't. It's just be unusual. You have to be very careful with that. So when you're creating, and then also if you're making something, if you're making like, if you're baking something, you're not going to throw in every flavor at once because then it just tastes bad. So it's just something, how I like to think of it. I kind of like to think of it like cooking food. You want to be, what's the word? Tasteful with what you put in and not put too much of something, because there is such thing. Check out Yuzo Koshiro's Super Arrange album. So again, he did the Etrian Odyssey music, and for most of the games, I think for the first 4, he did something called a Super Arrange album, where he took his own compositions from the game and then did new arrangements of them. And what I like about them is they're so different. Like, for example, there's one song that's in-game, it's just like some ambient voices and like some xylophones, and he turned that into this like driving EDM funky thing that's super cool, electronic style. And then there was the intro song for Etrian Odyssey 4, he turned it into a big band, and it's all on the same album, So it's really cool to hear how the guy reiterates his own music with live performers and stuff. Can't recommend him enough. Even if you haven't checked out the games, just listen to the original tracks, check out the Super Arrange, it's really cool. And then lastly, there are no rules. So take what you like. None of what we're saying are hard rules, they're just suggestions. At the end of the day, there's no rules in music. It's only what sounds good at the end of the day. What sounds good to you, most importantly. Because there's going to be a lot of stuff that sounds good to you that might not sound good to other people, and don't let that deter you, because not everyone's going to like your arrangements or your music, and that's fine. Don't try to please everyone. Please yourself. If you're happy with it, sounds good, great. Don't worry so much about rules. Break the rules. All right. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to show you my examples here.
Hold on.
When they pop up. There we go. Okay, so this is what I did for Framemakers. So they wanted me to play a song called Slay the Spire from Slay the Spire. So it's for a fighting game. This is what they sent me. Go ahead and play Slay the Spire. And this is the original theme. So when I heard this, I was like, what the heck am I going to do to make this for a fighting game? So very slow strings. And here's the triplets I was talking about. So that happens a lot. It's a figure that happens a lot. It's going to come up again right here. I felt that was critical for the melody to be digestible in an arrangement, to make it still sound close enough to the original, because it's already a lot of quarter notes and triplets, and I feel like you could kind of funk with quarter notes, but if you take out the triplets, it kind of lost the identity. So that's pretty much how the whole song goes. Go ahead, let's click on, not the next video, but I'm going to show you just a little bit. This is my MIDI mock-up. This was the MIDI mock-up I sent to the Super Soul Bros and to the devs for approval. For the devs for approval and then for the band to listen to record. So this is just MIDI. This was my idea. So what I did basically is you're going to hear that melody. I decided to put it on trombone. I did vary up the rhythm a little bit, but those triplets are still in there. And the bass line, that was the other thing I forgot to mention. But in that, there's a very prominent bass line underneath. I don't know if it's coming through the speakers, but I actually didn't even alter that bass line rhythm at all. I just put it in underneath because it kind of funks. So what I did, before we play it, I transcribed the melody for that. So the strings, da, 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 and then the bass line. And then I was just playing with that for a while, kind of listening to it. And then since I was in my DAW, I was like, I'm gonna drop a drum loop underneath it. And it was just like, boom, boom, ga, boom, boom, boom. I'm like, hey, kind of works. It kind of works like that. So that was kind of my initial thing, my initial starting point. I had the melody and bass, and then I'd put a drum beat under it, and I was like, hey, this really works. All right, I'm digging this. So let's go ahead and play it. This is the mock-up, like I said, that I sent to the Super Soul Bros. We'll just play a little bit of it. So the song's in F minor, so I keep it like an F minor pad underneath. There's the bass line. Here's the melody. So you hear the triplets, like I said, I left them in. Here, so I put a little piano thing there, and then the song changes keys. So that's why I went with the pad. Now the pad goes up a minor third. All right, let's go ahead and pause that. So that was my MIDI mock-up, and then I'll go ahead. We'll play like half of it, and then we'll skip to the end because it does. So I did the repeat thing I said not to do in this arrangement. I didn't really vary up the second A/B. Rather, I had the live performers, and I let their little improvisations come through. And part of the reason I didn't do it is because I knew it was kind of background music for the stage. I didn't want to be too distracting. Although there is another track I did, the character select from Rivals of Aether. And that arrangement does have a very clear, like the second time I added in different hits and stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'll play for you guys. This is how the final arrangement turned out that got into the game. Layering in instruments, percussion. I love cowbell and triangle. I use them a lot. I have the trombone kind of going through a filter. I wanted it to sound kind of like it's coming out of a, what do you call it? Record. Yeah, vinyl. It's all over that. The triangle. And the way I came up with that riff, that's throughout the whole thing, I just had two fingers, kind of doing chopsticks on the piano, messing around, and then I was like, hey, I kind of like that. And it became the whole basis of the arrangement. Counter melody. Very out. verses. I put that there just because it felt like something needed to be there. It's like the chorus. All unison. There's so much going on, I didn't want to make it super harmonized. So that's like the form of the song. And then we'll go ahead, skip ahead like a minute. I'll show you guys how I ended it. I just got to have a lot of fun with this. This is where it was totally just original. Right about there is good. Yeah. So I really like that breakdown. So this is a shortened version, but put a drum solo. And then I really like, key changes are very powerful. So we're gonna have drums are gonna solo over this groove we've been doing the whole time, and then we're gonna take it back to the original key for the guitar solo. And I think it's a really powerful thing when you lead into a section with key change like that. There's the short, gonna go right into it. It's after the yeah, it goes crazy. And then it's gonna go right back into the top. Yeah. Now we're back in. Yeah, we're back in the original key. Sets it up, and it's got a. This one has to loop, so it's gonna fade out because it's a loop in the end. So yeah, that was my arrangement. Late Aspired. That was kind of like the process I went through, how I got there. Like I said, that whole groove, the entire base of that chromatic groove is like, okay, I want it to stay on that pad. And I'm not a piano player, and I was just going like octaves, like kind of messing around with the drums, and then I just played that for a split second, and then I was like, wait, what was that? And it's like, oh, I like that. Okay, that's really simple. And it was just like that. So what I'm saying is, when you're doing this stuff, don't think, it'll come to you. These are like all tips to kind of ignite the spark. So that's kind of, I think, the theme of
Finish your
what I'm
projects.
saying. Yeah, finish your projects. Get that spark ignited. All these are tools for that to get it going. Once it gets going, that's the hardest part, I think, are the beginning and the end. Starting it is the hardest, and then closing it out is really damn hard because you never want to be done. It never feels done. But that's what deadlines are for.
Yeah. I feel like on the spark point, like for me, like the guiding principle that I always get is like, can I recall the melody the next day? Right? Like
Yeah.
I'll have musical ideas, or I'll be noodling on something, and I might write it down, or I might like do a voice recording. But if I'm not singing it in the shower the next day, if like I can't immediately recall it, that's usually means that I'm not excited about it.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's going to be harder for me to get it to the finish line.
Yeah, exactly. So
All right, so we're gonna move on now to Q&A. If anyone has any questions, feel free to line up over on this mic or don't. But so with the QR code, by the way, please don't use that because it's actually an outdated QR code. But yeah, let's get on to some Q&A. Come on, everybody.
Yeah, if you can come up, you're awesome.
Yeah, like especially it helps because there's the mic and we're gonna have this like stream recorded. Recorded later, so we want all the people at home to hear it on the VOD. Anyways, yes.
Sounds good. So yeah, I was just you touched on this a bit earlier when you were talking about like you've never played an instrument before, how to tell what things are possible, things like that. But I guess my question is, if you've never played an instrument before and you're arranging for somebody, how do you know that you've written a part that's kind of like fun and engaging for them to play?
That's a great question.
Ooh, that's difficult.
So I think there's two ways. So, I mean, you got to know what the musician. You have to know in advance who the musician is going to be that's going to play the parts, right? And know what their capabilities are. Like, oftentimes, if I'm working with someone who I know is just going to destroy it, I may not even write out. Like, I might do my first little like noodly bit, and then I'm going to say like, this is just to inspire you. Make your own fun, right? Because then not only will they do it, but they'll also add their own flavor and ideas to it, and it'll make it a stronger thing. But I think, to answer your question, to how to make something that's fun to play, there are a couple obvious things. Not a lot of repeats, right? Like, Alex was saying, and Lucas too, like, if you give a saxophone player footballs, just lots of whole notes, we're gonna be bored playing it, and it's just gonna, we'll play it, but we won't be excited about the part, and we won't, we'll give it back to you and be like, okay, here you go. But like, if you constantly vary it up, if you give interesting lines, if you give space, or for the artist's own expression, oftentimes they're gonna add to it in a cool way.
This is going to be really one of my best ways, and it's apparently worked really well for me so far, because a lot of the time I get back, oh my gosh, that was such a fun part to play. I noodle around on instruments, so I actually have this one track where I did, it was Final Fantasy VII's One Winged Angel for the Game Groove's Limit Breaker album, the Final Fantasy VII ska album, and I took One Winged Angel and basically made it into a Sublime song, and it only gets weirder from there, and there's like a theremin in it, a sorts of crazy choir, all sorts of other things that go, it's nuts arrangement. But like with the trombone, I remember I had Ian Martin doing some of the ending, God bless Ian Martin, wish he could be here right now. He was doing some of the ending orchestration for it, and I kept asking him, because I already had some trombone slides in there, and I'm like, can you put in more trombone slides? And even at the very end, at the last edit, I'm like, can you put in just one more trombone slide? And the trombonist who actually did it, like, it wasn't like the hardest part in the world, but it was a fun part, and it very clearly had its purpose in the piece.
Yeah, pretty much what they said, but also just, if you can, ask them, ask them. That's how I learn everything. Like Lucas said, don't be afraid to ask questions. Because, you don't know. There's a lot of instruments I don't know about, and that's how I find out, is I ask the people who play them. But also, last thing to touch on is, like, as far as making it fun, too, obviously it should be fun, but, if you have a plan for your arrangement, or you have like a vision for it. If you have a vision for it, you don't need to like make everything super crazy, complicated, just to make, please musicians. Make sure you're still maintaining the integrity of that vision. Yeah.
Yeah, along the same line, like Alex was saying earlier, like make a mock-up. I'm obviously I'm a garbage, producer mixer. Like I can't, like I do my best, and I've gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. But like I send MIDIs, right? Like I will make the MIDI sound as good as I possibly can with the tools that I have, knowing that when it will, if it sounds good in MIDI form, then it's gonna immediately sound better in live form. So if it doesn't sound good in MIDI form, maybe it can be salvaged. But like if you would listen to the MIDI and be okay with it, like then it can only get better.
All right, so some more questions?
Go for it. It also gets them hyped. I think if you send a good MIDI, then
Yeah.
the people who get it are like, oh yeah,
Agreed,
okay.
100%. Anyways.
Yep. So my question is, you were talking about the 8-bar method. You're talking about like daily writing some 8-bar method.
The 8-bar method.
Right. Oftentimes I can complete a phrase of music. What I kind of come across whenever I'm arranging my own music is if I end a phrase before I end my session of writing, I have some difficulty moving forward with the track because I ended a phrase. It's like, okay, what do I do next? So how do you approach that kind of writer's block? That also is a common thing that comes up when you're just starting a piece too. But
Oh,
it's
yeah,
common
that's
when
a-
you cut a phrase off right
Ooh,
there.
that's a really good question. So to recap, he asked, like, what do you do if you have something, you've created a block of music, but you don't know where to go from there? Two kind of methods I've thought worked really well for this one. One is kind of know when to unplug. This is apparently a common piece of writer's advice. There's a lot of writers out there who will just leave a sentence or a paragraph unfinished, so that way when they go into the session again, they know like what they need to do. And it's incredibly hard too. Like I've had over the years, I've learned like sometimes it just needs to be like you're hyped up in the session, you're working on the track, and I used to try to finish all of my tracks in one session, and now more often than not, my tracks tracks like arrange out to like 2 or 3 sections. The other one is to know kind of where the story arc is going. The story arc, like the form of a song is important, like your beginning, middle, and end. Kind of a lot of the story structure Joe talked about with the 3 or 4 act story structure. So like I know like the verse, the chorus, the this, because you can always go back and edit it later. And then the other one, this doesn't work for everyone, but back when I was doing 8 bars for a lot of different stuff, I kept writing it. I have this electro swing version of Gangplank Galleon that's just sitting on my computer as MIDI. And when I was writing that, before I just decided to add in a piano solo in it, I was like, I hate this arrangement and I hate everything about it, but I have forced myself to write these 8 bars a day because I am a madman. But then there was just, again, you're gonna have those days where it's like, it's trash, but you gotta get through the trash days to get through sometimes the good ones. And then like I had that day where I sit down and I was like, wait, I don't know where this is. I knew I didn't want it to go back to the head, like back to the start. And I knew I didn't want an original section necessarily. So I had these chords, and I was like, what if I try a piano solo here? And then, like, during that piano solo, I even have this, like, rhythm where it goes, I wish I had the mock-up of all the arrangements I'd refer to. I didn't think it'd be that one, but it's like, like at one part with the solo, it's like da 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 dun dun, and like then I take that same idea too, and that's another thing too. If you have an idea that you really love, you can take it and find another place to put it in. So yeah. Any other answers from the?
I have a couple things to add to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I kind of talked about it earlier briefly, but so using references. So when you've decided at this point in your arrangement process, you've probably got the style and genre figured out. So what you should be doing is, and also like borrowing and stealing, listening to, absorbing a lot of music in that genre that's not even, even if it's not related to that song. Because then when you get to that writer's block, you might have some more knowledge about that style. Like what would naturally come next in this style? The second is to have a roadmap, like they're talking about. Like if you have a plan for the track, like if you draw it out on a drawing board, like where you want it to go, or you have like an ultimate vision of where you want the song to go, even if you don't know what that next block is going to be, but I want it to be higher energy, or I want it to drop down, or I know that gives you something. And then lastly, and this just works for me sometimes, it doesn't always work, but I'll just be jamming along to the track, and then once it gets to the part where it ends, I try to see what my brain naturally thinks is gonna come next, because music is very, like I said earlier, there's only 12 notes, there's only so many rhythms, so you've absorbed so much music in your life and forms and common structures or forms where sometimes you're singing along to it, and then it ends, and then there's nothing, but then your brain kind of will sometimes fill in something right there. And if you're listening to a lot of references in that style, it might be easier. So that would be some advice I have for that.
Yeah, so we're all saxophone players, so like we're all dumb. So like, I mean, like
our instruments don't even play in the right key,
Yeah,
and we have to transpose everything.
But I think, I mean,
Anyways, continue.
That's true. But I think the point is, like, we think in terms of melody often, because saxophone is the most like singing of, compared to piano or guitar, we think in terms of melody, and that's like the guiding principle but the more tools you have, learning to play piano and learning, like, the more theory that I'm not, like, again, I think it's okay to not be a theory guy. Like, you don't have to know what you're doing or how you're doing it. But if you do know, if you have those tools, and if you have that, like, toolbox full of vocabulary, it allows certain things to be easier. Like, I was doing an arrangement. It was a arrangement of Rosalina at the Observatory. It was a saxophone quartet plus strings. And I knew there was a part where I wanted to have a bunch of key changes happening a lot, quickly, like, because it was a big dramatic thing. And I'm not actually that great at, like, key changes. Like, there are a couple of ways to do them, right? You can modulate up by half step. That's like, 101. You can find, yeah, exactly, or by whole step, or or you can find a common tone and just do 5/1s, 5/1s kind of thing.
Hey,
But-
man, do it by tritone.
Yeah, or you do it by trying. You can have those like, there are certain ways to do it, but then, the goal of the track was at that point, narratively in the track, you're not supposed to know where it's going. So it became a lot easier to just actually be like, I'm going to choose I'm just going to hit a key and I'm going to find some way to get there. And you have to give yourself a little bit of room within the arrangement for things to naturally happen while your roadmap needs to be clear. You should never hit to a point in the arrangement where you don't know where it should go. You should always know, at least conceptually, it needs to get to X point. But how you get there, you can give yourself a little bit of room to experiment.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Also,
And also finish your projects.
yeah, finish your project.
Tell me what to do.
Finish your projects.
And some general advice that I kind of remembered while Joe was talking: take a walk if you're if you're struggling. Go
Breaks are good.
take a nice 15, 30-minute walk. And clear your head. I got that advice from a composer who composes for AAA games, and he said that's what he does. He can't think of anything. Don't keep banging your head against the wall. Sometimes all you need to do is just go for a little walk and clear your mind and come back, sit down again, and suddenly the answer will be right in front of you.
You are all more than the things you make.
Yeah.
That was also a reminder for myself.
I
I think
just scrapping stuff. I mean, I agree. I do a lot of stuff with writing lyrics, and writing lyrics is a whole different puzzle. And if I can't find a good rhyme, I will often just scrap a whole project for a while and come back to it. In the middle of the night, I'll be like, oh, that's a good rhyme. I can use that.
I think we have time. How about one last question? If anyone else got one. Anyone?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for putting together this panel. I wanted to ask
welcome.
if you
Glad
had
to be
any-
here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was wondering if you had any tips on training your ears for mixing and mastering.
Okay. This is like
Are we all-
the.
No,
So
no,
I've
no.
done this panel twice, and this is we've gotten a mixing question at both of them. The part of it, a lot of what we said applies. Wait.
We're gonna do a sales pitch, aren't we?
So have you heard of a little site called Sound Gym?
Sound Gym is
But
fucking dope.
aside from Sound Gym, the best way is to train your ears on listen. A lot of it is training your ears on listening for the same stuff, like the low end, the high end, all that stuff. And one of the best tips of advice I got because there's so much going on, especially in some of our favorite songs. There's 100 layers of different tracks. But if you're just looking if you tell your ear, I'm just gonna look for what's going on the left side of the ear, screw the right side, that works really well. Or if you just how something is balanced compared to something else, where it sits in the mix, just one instrument, one bit at a time, and just try to emulate that. Mixing references can do a lot. And definitely cannot express how much feedback's important with mixing.
Yeah. And just to be completely transparent, so that arrangement of Slate Aspire, I did not mix or master that. That was not me. I had Mason Lieberman did that. So I that's not something in my toolkit that I'm still working on myself. But a couple tips I've learned from those guys. When you're mixing, always listen to your parts in context. So sometimes you're going to put some weird EQ on a part that makes it sound really bad on its own. But then when you make sure you're listening to it with the rest of the track. Don't try to EQ something in isolation, because it might sound good there, but then when the frequencies clash or something. And then lastly, the active listening I was talking about at the start of my slides was you can be actively listening to music and be going why is this a good mix? And compare it to your own and go what makes it better? And you might hear, okay, well, the low end is super clear. You might not know how to get that, but now you can, you have a little seed. You can go start Googling, go on YouTube and go how to make a clear low end. That's kind of what I do. I listen to why am I not happy with this mix? Oh, now when I listen to this other mix, I see their whatever is better, and then I look in how to improve that. But yeah, always be listening and asking, why does this sound good? Why is this mix so good?
Great.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
But it's something.
And
I
Sound
struggle
Gym
with.
is definitely a site worth looking into.
Sound Gym is really it's an ear training site. And they'll have these it's like gamified. It's like great for gamers. So like they'll play a hiss at a certain frequency, and you have to identify the frequency, and it just the basic fundamentals. Like if you're coming from a sort of traditional compositional background, your ears just don't hear those things that well, and being able to say like, oh, 500 hertz is too high, like being able to actually hear that just changes your whole approach, and it ruins your life too, but
Yeah. Thank you everyone again for coming out here. The last MAG panel. Hope you all had a happy MAG.
Thanks again, Lucas.